Okay, we got Ann back. Okay, Ann, you there?
Yes, you pushed the wrong button.
Sorry about that, Ann. Sorry about that. So,
no problem.
So anyway, the Reuters today, Ann, is publishing a scare story about what will happen if the border is closed down with Mexico. Have you seen this story?
Well, I've been watching TV, and apparently there's going to be a major guacamole shortage.
That's you hit it. You hit it. Within 3 weeks. So MSNBC and CNN are going to have a countdown. Only 20 days and 23 hours and 59 minutes until the United States runs out of guacamole.
No, I know. Day after day, old women, little children, little girls are being raped and murdered by illegal aliens, families, lives destroyed. But they think they have the human face of this, a guacamole shortage.
I know. I'm just going to read you a couple of headlines here. This is from the New York Post. MS-13 fiend held in gory sleigh. That's just one story. That's Long Island, of course. 3 men charged in Salt Lake drug distribution ring. Would you care to guess where the men are from?
I'm guessing south of the border.
Yes, Honduras. They're from Honduras. Yes, they're selling narcotics throughout the Salt Lake Valley, specifically heroin and cocaine. The latest, man sentenced to life for murder of Muslim teen. This was the one in D.C. They were going to blame it on people wearing MAGA hats, but then it turned out to be an MS-13 gangbanger from El Salvador. And the story,
yes.
Remember that one? The story disappeared immediately. 2 years later, they finally sentenced him. And he's been sentenced to life in prison for raping and killing a Muslim teenager as she walked back from a mosque. And that's
It's really stunning that the entire media just pedal to the metal. I mean, as you're describing, and you describe every day, how the media hides any crimes by immigrants and illegal immigrants. Both of them are a problem. And celebrating every hoax crime allegedly committed by a conservative. You got the media, you have the Republicans who, with their donors who want the cheap labor, the Democrats who want the voters. I mean, every elite group in America is absolutely determined to transform our country into a third world hellhole. And still, Donald Trump got elected. Remember how President Bush, the second Bush, this used to drive me crazy. He'd say, well, we can't do anything on abortion until we change hearts and minds. Well, no, not exactly. We don't, for all we know, we've changed 70% of the hearts and minds. We can't do anything until Roe is overturned. So that's really a BS line. And it's the same thing here. We don't need any more changing of hearts and minds. Every time despite the media blackout on immigrant crimes and immigrant, Medicare frauds and sucking up all of the social services, despite the media blackout on all that, every time Americans get a chance to vote on immigration, legal or illegal, they vote for less of it. They vote to shut down the border. They vote for a wall. They voted for Donald Trump. Now, we're living in, people are upset about Brexit. How about us? How many times do we have to vote for this and be betrayed on it?
I know. Trump is right that they have to change the asylum laws, but since the Congress won't change the asylum laws, right, then we have to get tough on the Mexicans and these countries in Central America. And that was a good first step, cutting off aid to those corrupt countries down south of Mexico. But if he has to shut the border down, I'm okay with that. It's like he's trying to get the attention of the Mexicans by threatening them. And I don't know. He may have to actually shut the border down. What's he going to do?
There are a million things he could do if he were not being advised by amnesty-loving Jared Nick Mulvaney.
I knew we were going to come back to that.
Things he can do. I know the things he talked about, when he was running and got us to vote for him. How about taxing remittances? Yeah, and he should have cut off the foreign aid as recommended in Adios America immediately. Use that money to pay for the wall. Yeah, you use a MacGyver solution. He's president of the United States. He has a lot of options, and if he had ever hired Kris Kobach, he could be golfing. He could be ogling his daughter.
Are you
he
running?
Could be doing whatever he wants
Ann, are
to
you
do.
running an employment agency now, and Kris Kobach is your first client? You mention him every week.
I've been somewhat consistent on this, demanding that he make Kobach his vice president, begging him to make Kobach his vice president. Boy, that was his biggest mistake. Why he didn't make Kobach head of Homeland Security, as he promised Kobach and the MAGA voters, is absolutely baffling. As I've said to you before, this is the equivalent. The only reason he has been so great, on appoint on his judicial appointments is he turned it over to the Federalist Society. What he has done on immigration is the equivalent of saying, I'm turning over my judicial selection to the ACLU. Nope, Federalist Society, we don't want to hear from you. Don't want to hear from you.
Listen,
don't give me Kobach. I want Ruth Bader Ginsburg, please.
Speaking of Homeland Security, the Obama head of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, was on MSNBC today. I want to play that cut for you because even Jay Johnson admits that it's totally out of control. Cut number 9, Taylor.
I'd get to work around 6:30 in the morning, and there'd be my intelligence book sitting on my desk, the PDB, and also the apprehension numbers from the day before. And I'd look at them every morning. It'd be the first thing I'd look at, and I probably got too close to the problem. And my staff will tell you, if it was under 1,000 apprehensions the day before, that was a relatively good number. And if it was above 1,000, it was a relatively bad number, and I was going to be in a bad mood the whole day. On Tuesday, there were 4,000 apprehensions. I know that 1,000 overwhelms the system. I cannot begin to imagine what 4,000 a day looks like. So we are truly in a crisis.
When Jay Johnson says we're in a crisis, Ann, I think we're in a crisis.
Yeah, no, I don't think it could not possibly have been worse, and it surely would have been better if Hillary had been elected. This is the worst we've ever seen of illegal immigrants pouring across the country when we voted for the most aggressive presidential candidate in U.S. history on immigration. Well, that's what we voted for.
I
got the opposite.
You talk about the judicial appointments. I have to bring up something else, and it kind of doubles back to the immigration double standard here. Have you seen that they've nominated Trump has nominated a guy for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein are objecting because the guy isn't a native of California, but he lives now in D.C., and they're saying, well, you can't nominate a guy for the 9th District if he doesn't live in the 9th District right now. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a second, are these the two same senators who have no problem with illegal aliens being admitted to practice law in the state of California? Not to mention voting and giving driver's licenses. And this guy went to high school in California. He comes back and he takes part in the town's garlic festival, the mayor said. And they're down on this guy.
No, plus which, I mean, that's a brilliant, brilliant point. Thank you, Howie Carr. Very good, of course. Once you say it, it's the obvious point to make, and very good. But it's not that unusual, particularly, I mean, if you'd been living in, I don't know, Kansas City, Fort Wayne, Indiana, but Washington, D.C., okay, so he has a federal job. We're not talking about the California Supreme Court. We are talking about a federal judiciary. If he has any connection, he doesn't even really have to have a connection. Usually you nominate somebody with a connection because otherwise they don't want to move to wherever they would have to sit to hear cases. But this is a federal court system. It really shouldn't make any difference if you're from there. Yeah.
No, I mean, it doesn't.
None whatsoever, actually.
I mean, this is, I guess they have this tradition in the Senate of blue slips, they call it. The senators have the sort of veto, but they're just going to do away with that because of these specious objections that the Democrats are raising to decent people.
Yes, that's one of those classic, rules of etiquette, unwritten rules that
it's
always operates as a ratchet effect. Yes, but all of these quote traditions operate as a ratchet effect against Republicans. The Republican senators will say, okay, well, the president is a Democrat. This isn't the guy I would have chosen, but it's not, outlandish. Go ahead, appoint Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who again passed the U.S. Senate by 98 votes with all these Republicans, because they said, okay, we lost the presidential election. And then a Republican gets elected and Democrats say, no, we're approving no one.
Right. Well, look at Bill Barr. I mean, Bill Barr was approved almost unanimously when he was George H.W. Bush's attorney general, and he barely slid through because he was nominated by Trump.
Right.
That's how much things changed in 30 years.
You're right. I mean, it is purely in that case because he was nominated by Trump, because as you'll recall, I watched those hearings very closely. I'm a fan of Bill Barr's. I was very happy to have him be AG. And, by the way, just for the record, I loved Attorney General Sessions. He was the only one doing anyone on immigration. But just, as a point of fact, when I was told they were making him AG, I threw a minor fit. And said, no, if you're going to put him any place, put him at Homeland. He should be doing immigration. Oh, no, but he's always wanted to be Attorney General. And I said, we have a few years to save the country. This is no time to be, he's always wanted to be Attorney General.
But he was okay on it. He was fine on immigration.
He was fantastic.
His problem was he number one, he appointed Rosenstein, the ultimate swamp creature, as his deputy, and then he recused himself from the Russia
Well, he
hoax.
he had to recuse himself. He absolutely had to.
You think so? Just because he had those two Russian generals into his office when he was on the Foreign Relations Committee, and he went to a buffet at the Cleveland Convention with the ambassador.
That wasn't why he recused himself. The issue was he worked on the Trump campaign. No one knew what the Democrats would leap on to try to overturn the 2016 election. It could have been Trump's taxes. It could have been his business dealings. But what they jumped on was this crazy claim that the Trump campaign had colluded with Russia. Since they were investigating, that's in quotes, the campaign, it was simply because Sessions, in fact, he was the first U.S. senator to support Trump.
Right.
He worked on the campaign, so yes, he had to recuse himself from an investigation into the campaign. If he had been Michael Cohen, and at this point I wouldn't put it past Trump nominating someone as preposterous as Michael Cohen to the position of Attorney General.
Come on, Ann.
He hired him. He was his lawyer for 20 years. Oh, that's crazy. He'd never do that. Anyway,
you just sometimes you need somebody. I mean, he didn't use him for the really big cases. He just used him he did use him as a fixer. I always object to that word fixer, but that's what he was. He was the fixer. He was the bag man, right? I mean, a businessman needs a bag man.
Serious person who would have had someone like Michael Cohen any place in his orbit. But let's leave that aside. He couldn't have made he had appointed Michael Cohen AG, and suddenly the Democrats decided they were going to investigate Trump's private business dealings. Well, Cohen would have had to recuse himself from that. And I guess he worked on the campaign. He would have had to recuse himself from that too. But it had nothing to do with the meeting with the Russian. This is absolutely by the letter, black letter law. Of course, Sessions had to recuse himself. That wasn't the problem.
It's like Trump always says, though. If I'd have known he was going to recuse himself, I would have told him to stay in the Senate. We got to go, Ann. Thanks for being with us. The title of her new book is "Resistance is Futile." Thank you, Ann. I'm Howie Carr.